We are approaching the NHL trade deadline, and there's quite a bit of speculation now surrounding Tyler Bertuzzi. How do you feel about the possibility of a Tyler Bertuzzi trade?
Well, I like Tyler Bertuzzi as a player. I think he's the type of player that every team wants to have, particularly when you get into the playoff season, because he is gritty. He does go into the corners, does the dirty work. He gets, sloppy, garbage goals. He does all that stuff. But he's been hurt a lot this year. He's only played, 21 games or something? Mm-hmm. Or whatever the total is. He hasn't had much of a season here. And his point total is way down because of that. He's starting to play better now that he's getting healthier and healthier. He could be a pretty big bargaining chip if you want to move him. But I'm wondering where the Red Wings are at here, because were they 5 points out or 6 points out
after last night's win?
The last spot I put in my notes. Now I'm forgetting what the number is. But they're
5 points behind the second wild card.
5 points behind the last wild card and 6 points behind the other wild card.
With a ton
spot.
of games in hand, by the way.
On one of them, yes, on the one where they're 6 points back.
Washington has played 55 games. They have 62 points. Detroit has played 52 games. They have 56 points. So that's basically on par if they win out, or in their 3 extra games. But there are other teams in between they'd have to catch up, and pass. Although Florida and the Islanders have 56 games played, and they're ahead of Detroit of 52 games.
I never worry about the teams that are in between. I worry about my own team and what the number is that we're chasing, which is that number of points that the wild card team has. I don't care if there's 5 teams in between. Doesn't matter to me. Get to that point. Keep playing good hockey. They scored 6 goals last night in Vancouver. They played much better last night. There was a jump in their step, and they survived a serious flurry in the second period by Vancouver. Vancouver could have gotten right back into that game, but they hit a couple of posts, and they were spent. They had a couple power plays. Looked like they had awesome power plays going, and they couldn't put the puck in the net, and then Detroit just kept putting dagger after dagger in there. 6 goals. Nice effort from the Wings last night. Great goaltending. And 2 more goals from Dylan Larkin, who's been on a tear. And I think he's got 5 goals in his last 3 games. But you're asking about Bertuzzi. If I were Steve Yzerman, this is one I would wait until as close to the trade deadline as you could. See where you're at. Because if you're now not only on the graphic, but you're right there with making the playoffs, do you want to get rid of a player that helps you in that situation, or do you want to add to this team? Do you think that maybe it's time that they go out and they give up some resources to acquire a player, that you become buyers at the trade deadline? It's quite possible that they could find themselves way out of it and then go ahead and you're going to move guys. And I think Bertuzzi's one of those players that might price himself out of what the Red Wings are willing to spend. It's what it seems. The vibe seems like that they're far apart, and that
it feels like Yzerman's trying to put in-house caps on players. It just feels like this. Okay, it feels like to me, outside observation, that he is thinking long term. Well, if I sign Larkin to A, then that's going to affect what I can pay Bertuzzi, and then down the road affect what I can pay Seider, affect what I can pay Raymond, affect what I can pay free agents. I'm going to try and cost control as best I can. And if I save $500,000 here, $500,000 there, over the course of 5, 6, 7 contracts, I might be able to get a whole nother good player out of it. But I'm looking at, so the reporting on this started with Jeff Merrick, I believe is his name, the reporter for TSN, who was talking about Bertuzzi, and his quote was, he's on an expiring deal. There were brief extension talks earlier in the season that didn't go anywhere. Nothing was serious. Then Kevin Allen, who's covered hockey, Red Wings forever,
today.
On Detroit Hockey Now, says the Red Wings will be looking for a combination of draft picks and player or players for Bertuzzi. His style seems to fit good for a contender looking for more grit in the postseason. Then he writes, if you're wondering who might replace Bertuzzi, think about Denver standout Carter Mazer, who's tied for third in the NCAA with 19 goals. He plays feisty style like Bertuzzi. I mean, years and years ago, my oldest son played against Carter Mazer.
Oh,
He was good, Gator.
Did he stand out?
When he was like 12, he was really good. Anyway, I mean, if they're not going to re-sign him, that's fine.
If you're not going to re-sign him, then trade him.
I don't want to particularly trade him.
I don't either. I really think he's the player that every team dreams of having in the playoffs.
More from Jeff Merrick of TSN. There are a few teams that have been attached his name to the Dallas Stars. We all know the relationship between Jim Nill and Steve Yzerman. We suspect that Dallas is looking for someone to play full-time with Tyler Seguin. Don't be surprised if they step up their efforts to bring Tyler Bertuzzi in. I believe Detroit is asking for something substantial. Edmonton has had some interest in Tyler Bertuzzi, and I believe Tampa Bay Lightning will as well.
So let's leave it as the three teams I mentioned there. Tampa Bay, which is they're clearly ties with Steve Yzerman.
Yep.
Because I don't know if you knew this. He used to be the general manager at Tampa Bay. Dallas, Jim Nill is there. Jim Nill used to be assistant GM in Detroit. And Edmonton. Ken Holland's the GM at Edmonton. Obviously used to be the GM here. So interesting, those are the three teams that are. Is that just the easy button to press if you're going to start speculating of who would trade with Detroit or who Detroit would trade with?
I mean, it might be.
Let this thing play out a couple more weeks here. We'll see. There are reports that are that Verana will be called up this week by the Red Wings and see how he acclimates himself with this team. I doubt there's any trade market for Jacob Verana just based on the fact that he was waived a month ago and nobody picked him up.
Yep.
Maybe it was just because of the salary at the time and it'd be easier to do now. I don't know. They look like they're getting healthy at the right time, but it's going to create some roster flexibility or too much.
But if Verona gets called up, don't they have to create another roster spot?
Yeah. So we'll
it's
see
so
what
weird
they
when you go
doing.
through this and your team isn't particularly good and you're talking about worried about who you have to expose to waivers.
But they've got guys that I don't think anybody would miss too much. I mean, they've got extra defensemen on this roster that they're playing 1 out of 4 games or whatever.
Now I just looked out 3 minutes ago. Kukla's Corner tweeted out, can confirm that Verana will be called up to the Wings. Expect that he'll play this week. A roster spot will need to be made available. So there you go. A story that's developing. Look, we talked about a couple weeks ago where the Hockey News put out a playoff graphic, and who was on it and who wasn't, and the Red Wings weren't on it. And, we thought, well, that seems weird because it felt like with the games in hand they should have been on it. But they, as it turns out, I think now they would be. 5 games out. 5 games out with 3 games in hand. 5 points. I'm sorry, 5 points out, 3 games in hand on the team. They're 6 points behind. Feels like they're very much in this thing. And at the very least, it gives a fan base something to lean into and have some fun with. Hey, playoff chase, right?
Be nice. We'd like to see somebody make the playoffs. And, the Lions were that close. Came down the last week of the season. We needed help to get there, unfortunately. And the help was there, but the referees took it away in Seattle. So now it's the Red Wings' turn. They're the next team up that has a legitimate chance to make the playoffs. They're still on the outside looking in, but they're getting closer and closer. As this goes on, they'll play tomorrow night in Edmonton, which is not going to be an easy task.